Welcome to Provocative Conversations from Twice 5 Miles Radio. I'm your host, James Nave. Today I'm going solo with a subject that I suspect might be of interest to you if you are making a living in the arts or using your creative inclinations to make a living in the entrepreneurial realms or going solo in some kind of business that you're dreaming of doing. So where I would like to start is with the definition of work. And I would like to begin with a poem by Philip Levine titled, "What Work Is." I favor this poem because it describes the people I grew up around, the folks who went to work every day, did the job, came home, got up the next morning, did the job again. That was my exposure when I was growing up to making a living. I don't remember anybody talking about how to make a living as an artist or how to make your way in the arts or any kind of creative field at all. I grew up around work. So this is why Philip Levine's poem is an important poem for me, because it describes what work is, which is the title of the poem. So here you go. What work is. We stand in the rain in a long line, waiting at Ford Highland Park for work. You know what work is. If you are old enough to read this, you know what work is, although you may not do it. Forget you. This is about waiting, shifting from one foot to another, feeling the light rain falling like mist into your hair, blurring your vision until you think you see your own brother ahead of you, maybe 10 paces. You rub your glasses with your fingers, and of course, it's someone else's brother, narrower across the shoulders than yours, but the same sad slouch, the grin that does not hide the stubbornness, the sad refusal to give in to rain, to the hours of wasted waiting, to the knowledge that somewhere ahead a man is waiting who will say, "No, we're not hiring today," for any reason he wants. You love your brother. Now suddenly you can hardly stand the love flooding you for your brother, who's not beside you or behind or ahead because he's home, trying to sleep off a miserable shift at Cadillac so he could get up before noon and study his German, works 8 hours a night so he can sing Wagner, the opera you hate most, the worst music ever invented. How long has it been since you told him you loved him? Held his wide shoulders, opened your eyes wide and said these words, and maybe kissed his cheek. You've never done something so simple, so obvious, not because you're too young or too dumb, not because you're jealous or even mean or incapable of crying in the presence of another man. No, just because you don't know what work is. So Philip Levine closes that poem by saying, you're not able to do all of this because you don't know what work is, implying it's a lot more arduous to work at figuring out how to reach out to the brother than it is to stand in the factory line and work an 8-hour shift at Cadillac. Philip Levine published that poem in 1991. George H.W. Bush was the 41st president during that time. America had been in a recession from 1990 till March 1991. So when Philip Levine crafted that poem, it would make sense that unemployment was still a problem. People were standing in line, trying to get work, trying to make a living, and they would stand there waiting, and they would finally get to the person holding the clipboard, and that person would say, "No, we don't have any work today." In March of 1991, I was working as a performance poet, touring the country performing poetry for school students, state after state, school after school, kindergarten, middle school, secondary schools, even going overseas into the international schools. So I was indeed making a living doing creative work. And yet I wasn't particularly thinking of myself as artistic or creative. It was just an interesting way to travel around the country, to interact socially with professional teachers as well as students, and to get some good experience in the theatrical world. And yet I didn't call what I did during that time frame work. I didn't understand that I was actually working at something that I enjoyed. I always thought work was a drudgery, something you had to do in order to pay your bills, in order to make a living. And indeed, that is true for most people. And I will tell you, I've done a fair amount of work within that frame. And yet I always thought, even when I was a young fellow, I wanted to do my work on my own terms, live my life on my own terms. Now, there's a price for that, just like there's a price for everything else. We'll get into that a little bit later. So when you are thinking of making your living on your own terms, making your living doing the creative work you'd like to do, the artistic work or the entrepreneurial work, what are some of the questions that you must ask yourself in order to set the tone, set the mood, if you will, to go forward? What are the things that you need to know, and how do you learn them? In my opinion, the most important thing you can do when you're thinking about moving in this direction is to trust the intuitive sense that you have about the things that you really, really want to do, the things that sparkle in your imagination. I'm not talking about the mystical dreams that you might have in between waking and sleeping. I'm thinking now of the things that you might fancy you would like to do, and yet you might count yourself out. You might think, this is beyond my scope. You might even have people in your community who would discourage you because it seems too fanciful in their mind, while in your mind, it seems eminently practical. Even if the actual object of what you would like to do, like being a famous film director, seems a bit impractical from where you stand, if you take a look at that impulse, that sense of something that you want, like I want to be the film director, and I'm saying this because that's what I wanted when I was a little boy. I wanted to be a film director. I didn't know why. The important thing here is to lean into those sensibilities that you have that seem far-fetched, that might seem at a distance, and then evaluate what it would actually take to make it happen. What you will find when you do this evaluation, you will discover that a lot of the actions required to get you to the grand vision that you have, or the grand dream, or the ambition, the actions that are required will likely be compatible with the things that you already enjoy, what you like, what your personality is set up to accommodate. You may already have a sense of what I'm talking about. You already have a goal perhaps in mind. But what if you don't have a goal in mind? What if you've been thinking, gee, I'd like to figure this out for myself. I'd like to zero in on something that I would like to focus on that's within my range. How do I do that? How do I find it? Well, here's a practical way that you can at least start to look for it. You may be familiar with the author Julia Cameron. She wrote the important book on creativity titled The Artist Way. She's also written many other books, including The Right to Write, It's Never Too Late to Begin Again, and The Vein of Gold, just to name a few. In the mid-90s, I started to work with Julia when she invited me to come to Taos and help her produce the Artist Way creativity camps at Mabel Dodge Lujan House, 95, 96, and we did this all the way through to 2001. A lot of people have used the Artist Way ideas over the years to make their livings as artists and creatives. So it's a great book to connect with if you haven't already. And if you do have it and you've used it in the past, you know what I'm talking about. So, of course, we did address the question of how to make a living as an artist very often in those camps. And I've actually addressed that question quite a bit over the years. There was an exercise that we did at each camp that seemed to be most effective. So I'm going to offer that to you now as a way to help you begin to understand, if you don't already know, those things that you would really like to do that maybe you haven't engaged just yet. So here's how it worked. We usually had between 30 and 60 people in a room, and everybody had their notebooks on their laps, and they were eager to find ways, find their artist's way, the way. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? So we would do this one exercise that was very effective. Julia often led the exercise. Sometimes I did. So Julia would say, number your papers from 1 to 10 and list the 10 magazines that you pull off the shelf and you read casually while you're waiting for a bus or a train or a plane. And the brief was to make sure you list the magazines that you actually pick off the shelf, the ones that really draw your eye, not the ones that you're officially supposed to be reading, that you want everybody to know you read. For example, I do read National Geographic, and I read the New York Times, and I read the editorial section of the Wall Street Journal while I'm waiting for a plane. That's the official version. But what if you pull the National Enquirer off the shelf and read the gossip section of the National Enquirer? Or what if you loved car magazines and you read about the muscle cars of old, or you dreamed about owning a McLaren or being a racing driver? Or you just couldn't stop reading about Lynn Hill and her most famous accomplishment, which was to do a free ascent of the nose, the big iconic wall route on El Capitan in Yosemite Valley. And then the next year, she did the first one-day ascent of the nose. It was a feat so groundbreaking that many top climbers considered it almost impossible before that, but she proved them wrong. So those are just some examples of the kind of magazines that you might pull off the shelf. So Julia would ask people to number their papers from 1 to 10. People would list those magazines. And then she would ask people to circle the top ones that they picked, the top 3. And then, which one did you pick first? And the one that you pick first, the one that you're most drawn to, is likely the place to start looking for those things that shine, that twinkle, the things that you are most interested in, that you like to do. So, for example, Lynn Hill climbing El Capitan, you might not want to be a climber, but you might want to do it your way. You might be interested in setting some kind of standard for yourself, doing something that seems beyond what you thought you could do. And continuing with the idea of reading about Lynn Hill, you may also find, if you have an interest like that, that you would read other stories about other people who did things similar to what Lynn Hill did. And soon you would find you couldn't stop reading it. It would become the research. And in all of that research, you might find something that really keeps your interest. And when something holds your interest over a long period of time, you can be pretty sure you're working in your strong place, your strength base. So keep in mind that when you're working on projects or ideas that are built upon your strengths, that are grounded in your strengths, you have a much better chance of maintaining long-term momentum, achieving excellence. You can also work in arenas that are not in your strength base, things that you're somewhat interested in, but maybe not quite, but you sort of think you should do it, so you do it because you're going to please somebody else. You'll be able to be fine with it. You'll do well. You'll hold up, but you won't achieve a sense of excellence. You will fall short because you just don't have the dazzle that comes with something that your soul is calling out for you to do. So maybe we really are talking about destiny here, but not something complicated, not something grand, something more grounded in the things that you want to do. For example, I said I wanted to be a film director when I was a little boy. Of course, the fellow I announced that to told me that nobody around Western North Carolina could ever be a film director because folks around here just don't do those kinds of things. Well, I actually believed the guy, sadly enough, and yet I was hinting at the things I was interested in. So what does a film director do? A film director thinks about strategy. A film director does creative work. A film director directs people to implement some collective effort. It's very cooperative proposition. I have all of those traits even to this day. When Julia Cameron and I were doing the Artist Way Creativity Camp, I was in charge of putting the creativity camp together. I was the director. Ding, ding, wow, sizzle, bang, duh. Film director, directing the creativity camp, directing workshops, directing things, putting things together. The film director puts things together. I love to assemble things. I mentioned what work is, and the people in my community who worked when I was a boy, they got up, they went to work. I've mentioned this many times on the show here. I've referenced my father. He worked for Carolina Power and Light, which was the local company that strung electrical wire throughout Buncombe County to bring lights to all the homes in the Asheville area. My father did well at the power company. He ended up being a supervisor. But he was in the middle. Wasn't necessarily mediocre, but he didn't love his job. But my goodness, did he ever love music? Music was his strength. He played music. That was his work. That was his calling. That was his dream. And he did it all his life. And I don't believe he got paid for it all that much. It wasn't about making money. He was making a living as a musician, but it wasn't a living that generated money. It was a living that generated a life that he loved. While my father didn't study music, he certainly played it and had a lifelong interest in it. So here's another tip to build on as you're thinking about how to find these places to go where you can build on your strengths. An organization or a person will go in the direction of the questions it asks and the topics it studies. So if you find things in your life that you are dramatically interested in, and then you go in the direction asking questions and studying the topics around the thing that you really find curious, interesting, and imaginative, it won't be long before you will start to develop a direction that you can go in that could actually make you a living, which would include making money while you do it. And you won't be standing in the line wondering what work is. You will be busy doing work that you know suits your sensibilities. This does not happen overnight, my friends. This takes a while to figure out. And yet I'm saying it is possible to figure it out. And you don't always get it 100%, and you never have all of the answers, but you do drop in. And once you do, you start to know that sweet spot. Oh yeah, that feels good. I can do this now. I can track this. And there's something miraculous that happens when you move in those directions. Synchronicity starts to happen. Julia Cameron talks about synchronicity in The Artist Way. Of course, synchronicity is something that's happening around you all the time. It's not happening because suddenly it's some magical offering. What is happening is you are noticing the synchronistic things that are going on around you that are providing you the momentum you need to take you forward toward those strength-based dreams that you're working towards. In Philip Levine's poem, What Work Is, the brother studying German was working towards some kind of dream. He was driven to go that 20 or 25% more in terms of effort after he spent long shifts at the Cadillac Company to listen to opera and to study German, to try to find a way to do work that suited him. So he worked studying German and listening to opera, in addition to working shifts at Cadillac. It would be fair to say that my father worked his shifts at Carolina Power and Light, and then he played music as much as he could when he was not working at the power company. So his music, in a way, was more his work than the work he did when he was on the shift. I said earlier, when you are doing something that you want to do, when you are tracking something meaningful for you, trying to make a living artistically or as an entrepreneur or as some kind of creative in any of the categories, there's a price you pay for it. My father was working at the power company. I don't know what price he paid for working at the power company. He seemed to enjoy doing what he did, more or less. I do know he found great joy, great satisfaction in working his music, showing up and playing. In fact, the musicians that I knew back in the day when they were all playing those Appalachian tunes and gathering around in circles all over Western North Carolina, they never called it work. They would say, we are going to play music. So there's a tie to tracking something you enjoy and playfulness and play. The play and the work become synonymous, whereas when you're doing work, where it's the heavy lifting drudgery at the factory, like the fellow at Cadillac, play isn't as much a factor in that. So the price you pay for this kind of inquiry or this kind of strategy around doing what you want to do is that when you make these decisions to go in directions that have joy in them, that have happiness in them, that have meaning in them, like everything else in life, it may not work out exactly like you thought it would. Things change. You may not get exactly what you dreamed of getting. You will get something, and that something that you will get is the satisfaction of knowing that you are making the effort, just like the brother in What Work Is. He may do nothing with his opera and his German other than find enjoyment when he's not working at Cadillac. And yet he also will bring to his Cadillac job at the assembly line a sense of self that he can credit to doing the kind of creative work that he wanted to do. You can test the value of doing things you want to do by reviewing your life. When you have had the opportunity to engage in the things that really give you deep joy, how do you feel? How does your body feel? How do you feel afterwards when you are through doing whatever it is that you've done and you sit back and think about it? You relax into the idea that you've done something meaningful for yourself. How does it feel? I can't speak for you, of course, but I can tell you when I've accomplished something that's satisfying for me, I feel a sense of pride. I feel a sense of joy, levity, accomplishment, a sense of self that is very satisfying. Something to keep in mind here regarding the idea of work and doing things that are meaningful for you. Sure, you can do the grand gestures. You can graduate with a PhD from a prestigious university, and when you get your degree and you hold it in your hands, there's a deep sense of satisfaction in having done something meaningful that took a long time to do, that required a great deal of effort. And while that is indeed important and certainly deserves celebration, you can also have the same satisfaction from smaller actions, smaller things that you do, like cooking a meal for 2 or 3 friends and having them over for dinner, serving the meal and seeing them all have great satisfaction on their faces, not only because they ate the food you prepared, they also laughed, had good conversations, listened to music, and generally had a satisfying time, and nobody at the table was measuring what time they started and when they had to go home. It just happened when it happened. Those kind of experiences are full in the same way that the brother at the Cadillac factory, when he went home, enjoyed his opera and enjoyed studying German. Or for that matter, my father coming home from work and playing music. There's a universal satisfaction that comes when you hit those sweet spots. There's another price to pay, and that price is the disruption of your status quo. If you've gone in the direction of your strengths and in the course of your life, you've had to shift things around in order to make that happen, to disrupt the status quo that you were working in, to move in those directions, you have a sense of exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't had that experience, you probably know people who have gone in that direction. Maybe you've even admired their efforts and thought you'd like to take chances in the same way that they've taken their chances. So here we are at another price, taking risks and taking chances that may or may not pay off in the way that you think you would like for them to pay off. And that's another variable that comes into play. When you move in these new directions, you have to continuously readjust the way you see outcomes, the way you measure success, the way you use the experiences that you have to keep building on what you're trying to do, regardless of how they seem to work out in the short term. Collectively, they all build in a direction that has value for you in the end. It's a matter of consistency, and it really is a matter of work. Developing, studying, building your skills, showing up every day, trusting that what you do will have meaning for you, will pay off, quote unquote, in many ways, and will require a great deal of effort on your part. Effort that may seem difficult sometimes, but you still enjoy doing it. And that's where the energy lies. That's where the fuel lies. I said a moment ago that you probably know people who have taken these kinds of risks. For example, a carpenter working 10 years on the job, building homes that are beautiful homes for people, doing interior work, finish work, loving everything about turning rough wood into something beautiful. How about we give our carpenter a name? Let's go with Sierra, who is satisfied with the last 10 years of work that's been done. The productions made, the houses built, the cabinets finished. And yet Sierra knows there's more. Let's say Sierra has been looking at fine art magazines for the last 2 or 3 years and dreaming of making furniture that's considered museum quality art, furniture that's collected, maybe even building houses with the name Sierra written on a plaque because the house becomes a collectible item built by Sierra. Or maybe Sierra is dreaming of building a beautiful staircase in a building designed by a very famous architect, being invited to build the staircase, being paid well to build the staircase, being celebrated for the contribution. Sierra also understands that going in this direction will require a fairly serious disruption of the status quo, which would include moving away from the top-end carpenter job that paid $42.50 an hour. Let's say Sierra was a single parent of 2 children and was depending on that $42.50 an hour to support the family. Carry that a bit further, Sierra is working for a well-established construction company that provides full benefits, family health insurance, a retirement plan, and a company truck to drive. And finally, let's say Sierra is 38 years old. So with a profile like Sierra's, what would you advise Sierra to do? What kind of strategy would you give Sierra to move in the directions of the calling, of the sensibilities, of the higher ideals? What kind of assumptions can you make about Sierra and how Sierra has gone about doing the work in the last 10 years or so? I said Sierra had been working for the construction company for 10 years. Did I say how long Sierra had been doing woodworking? How long Sierra had been interested in the artistic aspects of beautiful wood making? I mentioned Sierra had been reading magazines about woodworkers who made museum quality pieces. I said Sierra had been reading them for the last 2 or 3 years. Maybe Sierra has been reading these magazines longer than 2 or 3 years. So as we build out Sierra's character, it's easy to see how the dreams and aspirations we have, the ambitions we have for artistic things or otherwise, live in a comprehensive arena. And they're not contained in just one bubble of urgency. I want to do this. I have to do this. I want to do it now. Keep in mind that the now is not an endpoint. The now is the ongoing work that you do incrementally over a period of time. So if Sierra wants to move in the direction of fine art, and eventually move away from the construction company while still keeping all of the benefits that exist now, what kind of advice would you give Sierra? What kind of strategy would you suggest? What kind of assumptions might you make around where Sierra has been and where Sierra might go? The first suggestion I would make to Sierra would be to ask Sierra to inventory all of the skills that already exist, to inventory all of the experiences, to analyze how much of what is already known can be transferred into the world of making fine art furniture. I would also point out to Sierra that the direction of going toward fine art furniture might have some risks. The risks might not be as great as it first seems. Building Sierra's scenario out a bit grounds the conversation in the reality of life. It's not a one-dimensional thing, this business of trying to find what you really want to do, this business of tracking your strengths, because it's so easy to get off course. And it's equally as easy to do a bit of an inventory and discover that you may be more on course than you think. You just haven't noticed it. So inventory your life, inventory your skills, inventory the work that you have done and the experiences that you've had. And likely you will find that a lot of the experiences that you've had, the things you've studied, what you've been deeply interested in, match those magazines that you took off the shelf when you were at the bus station or the train station or the airport. And Julia Cameron was absolutely right about that exercise. I've seen people do that exercise many times, and it's a very accurate proposition. You can also do the exercise by listing the top 5 novels that have influenced you or the top 5 movies that have influenced you. It's all the same idea. If you're drawn to something and you pay close attention to it and you can't take your eyes off of it, there's a lot of information there around your strengths and what you are most interested in. For example, Sierra is a carpenter. Sierra does high-end woodworking. Sierra is interested in the artistic aspects of the work that has been going on for all of these years. So what is Sierra actually interested in? What magazine or book might Sierra take off the shelf while waiting for a flight home for Christmas? You could guess it fairly easy. Perhaps a book about architecture, a magazine about design or celebrity homes. Would you be surprised to learn that Sierra might pull a book about mathematics and higher physics off the shelf? If you think about it for a moment, there's no surprise there at all. Fine art, woodworking, carpentry, mathematics, and higher physics all fit together. So it would follow that Sierra's deeper interest lies in a fascination with the order of things, which certainly applies to fine art woodworking. It also applies to many other aspects of life as well. So would it be fair to assume that Sierra would enjoy working with all kinds of order, building a bridge, laying out a garden, organizing the house, creating structures that people could function in? Probably would be. Those are the strengths that Sierra has. And when you move in the direction of your strengths, you have enough momentum to continue on. And as you continue on, your work becomes more and more refined. Soon people will say, there's excellence in the work. So here we are again, back to what work is. Work is, of course, many things. And every job that exists has people working that job who absolutely love it. It's their calling, no matter what kind of job it is. Now, some people are forced to work, and they're forced to work in situations they do not love and are not called to do. I doubt people in those situations love the work they're doing because it's not part of who they are. But when you move away from that and you just look at the jobs that exist and the people that do them, you can always find somebody who loves a job that you would never imagine loving. So with that in mind, it's fairly easy to see how a decent 5-year plan could actually start to move in the direction of making fine art pieces out of wood. Sierra would have to keep the day job for a while, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with keeping the day job. The most important thing is to move in the direction of the things that you do and let the elements around you support that movement, whatever those elements are. Keep the day job is a good piece of advice. Some people do get so frustrated that they simply can't do the work that they're doing anymore, and they do quit the day job. And that's fine too. Regardless of whether you keep your day job or whether you quit your day job, it's important to employ strategy and planning around the next steps that you make. It's very, very easy to not do that. It's very easy to respond emotionally to a situation without thinking it through. I'm speaking from experience here. I have done the emotional response and I haven't thought things through, and the results have never been exactly what I thought they would be. It worked out okay often, and yet when I look back on it, inventory the experience, inventory what I learned, I think, gee, if I'd only had a mentor, if I'd only bothered to ask advice. So here we come around to something that is really, really important for anyone who wants to make a living going solo, make a living in the arts, doing the creative work, or other kinds of work as well. Do the research, ask people for help. Go out and find people who are doing the work and engage with them and ask them to tell you exactly how they went about setting things up. What you will find most of the time, you will find people will tell you pretty much the same thing. They will say they made a decision to do something. And most people who have succeeded have gone about it systematically. They've developed a practice. They work with other people in their categories, and they stay steady with it over a long period of time. The key to this work, the key to living a life on your own terms in the arts or in other categories, is showing up, doing the work, staying small in the sense of incremental smallness, and building over time. And the main thing, and this is probably the most difficult part, the main thing is to trust what you're doing will work over a long period of time. It will build out. From a writing point of view, and many people choose writing as their art form, poetry as their art form, as I have. If you write for 10 minutes a day, and you do that every day for a year, you'll generate 130 words a day, which equals 47,000 words in a year, which equals a small book. Another thing to remember when you're moving in the direction of autonomy, freedom, doing things your own way, freelance life art, making a living in the arts or in the creative fields, other fields, there's no fixed point. There's no end. You don't get to somewhere. You arrive every day at a point that is the jump-off point for the next day and the next and the next. When you think about film directors, I'm thinking of Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood is now, I believe, in his 90s. I read somewhere that he's making another movie. The author Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who also owned City Lights bookstore in San Francisco, published a novel on his 100th birthday. So it really is just a matter of keeping things moving and also remembering that when you decide to go in the direction of making a living, doing it as a business, it is a business. Now, if you are doing it as a pleasurable pursuit with no business in mind, all you want to do is generate your artistic efforts, make the things you want to make, build the things you want to build. And many people do this from a woodworking point of view, as well as other points of view as well. People have shops in their basements. They have shops in their garages. A lot of people have a studio in their house. They paint just for the pleasure of painting. They make photography for the pleasure of making photographs. They do all kinds of things just for the pleasure of it with no business involved in it. I'm a fan of that. I like it that way, actually. I prefer the hobby. I prefer being an amateur. But if you want to go pro, you have to look at it from a business point of view. Sometimes you may have a hobby and people will love what you do so much they'll start to pay you for it. My brother David, a retired tool and die maker, has a shop in his garage. And when Hurricane Helene hit, as you know, if you live in Asheville, many trees were just blown over and left on the ground. My brother ended up with at least 3 cords of wood from those trees that had been blown over. And he decided to start making little wooden bowls. And he went from wooden bowls to chess sets. And he went from chess sets to doing all kinds of little wooden tools for people who knit. And he told me, he said, I'm not doing this for money. I don't really need the money. I just like to make these bowls. I can't stop. And look, this one has this color, and this one's different than that one. Oh my goodness, this came out of that wood. And oh, the cherry is so different from the oak, and the oak is so different from the walnut. And he couldn't be happier with it. Guess what? He took a few of his items to a knitting conference. His wife loves being in the knitting community, and he sold everything he had. He made $700 unexpectedly. And that's delightful. My brother David is not trying to make a living as a woodworking artist, and yet he's compelled to make these beautiful things. And I remember when he was a little boy, he learned how to play the piano. And by the time he was 14, he could play a beautiful piano. David had very, very large fingers, and I would always watch him play and wonder, how could such large fingers, such large hands, play such soft music? My brother still has large hands, and he makes now hard things out of wood, but he still has that soft, delightful touch he had when he was playing the piano. So this can be about making a commercial living. It's also about living, making a living in the sense that you are living into the things that give you great pleasure. The goal is to do this as much as you possibly can in your life. And you don't have to give up the day job. You don't have to leave home. You don't have to move away. You don't have to do any of that. You can easily track the things that give you joy. I mentioned earlier about Julia Cameron's Artist Way. When you think about the title of that book, the artist, that's you, and the way is the direction you choose to go in, the road you take, the path you follow. I need to find the way of my artist. I need to find the direction I go in. If you are Sierra, you need to find your way in the direction of the museum. If you're my brother David, making wood like Sierra makes, you need to find your way to the shop every day. And if you find yourself burdened by all of the mess that life brings, and indeed it does deliver quite a messy proposition, you can still pause for a few minutes in between all of those things, take a deep breath, look out the window, and consider the colors in front of you. Consider the symmetry in front of you. Consider the beauty that's around you right now. There's always a bit of beauty in everything. If you look at a plant for 20 minutes and then you walk away from it, you will remember that plant for a long, long time. You do have the power, no matter how messy your life, to relax for a moment and consider the ease that's in front of you. Even in the busyness of it all, there's always ease as well. There's the contrast. Therein lies the tension. Therein lies the story. How do you tell it? How do you express it? What do you do with it? So if you do want to make your living from a business point of view as an artist, first of all, make a decision. Second of all, develop your social media. Third, get an accountant. 4, be unafraid to talk to everybody about what you're doing. 5, have confidence in what you do and have confidence in what you say, and know that when you throw yourself into something, people will find it magnetic because a part of them would like to do the same as well. 6, be unafraid to put a price on the services that you are offering. You're not chopping down the rainforest. You're not destroying the earth. You're making a living, doing something meaningful that has value for others, and that deserves a respectable price tag. 7, make sure to accept that what you're doing is a business. A pizza restaurant is a business. A car dealership is a business. A writing career is a business. A filmmaking career is a business. Anything you do to generate business and money is indeed a business. And if you're doing it solo or with a small group of people, it's really smart to think of it from a business point of view. If you're doing artistic things, you may get a bit of pushback. Some people think, oh, you shouldn't really charge for that. You should be teaching that course for free because it's art. The opposite point of view is, because it is art, I should charge 3 times as much, not give it away for free. Of course, there's some happy place in the middle. You're making a living. you should charge for your art. And I use the word should in the most powerful way I possibly can. Yes, you should charge for the work you do, and you should charge a fair price, and you should expect people to pay for it. In my experience, whenever I've known anyone who did that, people do tend to pay for it. It might take a bit of time to build up the momentum. Even so, it's important to respect yourself and to respect the others around you by valuing the work you do and the things you make that you offer to the people in your community or even into the broader world. And finally, 8, be prepared for people to appreciate what you do. Also, on the flip side, be prepared for some criticism. People will feel jealous. People will likely have some naysaying inclinations in your direction. If you do get that, smile, listen to them, thank them for their input, and move on your way, staying true to what you want to do. And in fact, you kind of ignore them a bit, even though you nod and smile. So if you can do those 8 things when you're building your business out, when you're building your life out, you'll probably find that over a period of time, you'll end up doing exactly the things that you want to do. And when you move toward the end of your life, toward the retirement time, you'll be able to look back over it and say, it didn't work out exactly like I thought it would, but it certainly worked out. It's certainly been an interesting ride. I pushed it a bit. I took some chances. I took some risks, as they say in the song. I did it my way. And yet doing it your way means that you are doing things that you want to do, but you're always going to be doing those things in accord with other people. Nobody ever does it alone. And that may be number 9 on the list. Remember, you're never alone in this work. All of this is a community effort. It's a movement almost, a movement of artists and creatives and other kinds of work. Actually, everything is really creative when you think about it in the end. It's a movement. So you do it with others, and you do it alone. And it's really worthwhile to appreciate all of those things. As Robert Frost says in his poem, The Road Not Taken, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Here's the key to that poem. Taking the road less traveled doesn't make you unique. Everybody takes a road that is not traveled at all, which makes it less traveled because nobody has been on the road, because it's your road. You travel it. And in the end, you look back and you tell it with a sigh. But is the sigh a sigh of relief? Is the sigh a sigh of joy? Is it a sigh of sadness? Is it a sigh of regret? Probably all. Probably all. And if you can have all of that in the sigh at the end, looking back over the road less traveled, thinking about all the roads you didn't take, and you can't go back and take them. You've taken the one you've traveled on. And that is what's made all the difference. And the beauty of the roads you take, you don't have to go very far from home. You don't have to travel many, many miles. You can if you want to, or you can stay right home in the neighborhood you were born in and still travel a great distance. When I'm thinking about these things, I always come round to Tennyson's Ulysses. The light begins to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes, the slow moon climbs, the deep moons round with many voices. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off and sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows. For my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. It may be the gulfs will wash us down. It may be we will touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. That's the last part of Ulysses by Alfred Lord Tennyson, spoken from Ulysses' point of view. I've recited that piece many times on this show. It keeps coming back for me. My purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. When you make these kinds of choices, when you take the books off the shelf and you read the books you love and you decide what you're most interested in, then you're always going to be driven to sail beyond the sunset. You want to go somewhere. You want to take the road. You want to keep following it. You want to go somewhere and do something. It's interesting that when Julia Cameron asked people to fill out those 10 spaces on their empty sheets, it's about being in an airport or in a bus station or at a train station. It's about movement. It's about going somewhere. The way. Which way will you go? And what will the road look like? And how long does it last? Charles Wright sums it up at the end of Lonesome Pine Special, a long poem he wrote about landscapes. And here's what Charles Wright says. The road in is longer than the road out, even if it's the same road. I think I'd like to find one, impassable by machine, a logging road from the early part of the century, overgrown and barely detectable. I'd like it to be in North Carolina, in Henderson County, between Mount Pinnacle and Mount Ann, an old spur off the main track the wagons and trucks hauled out on, blackberry brambles and wild raspberry and poison ivy everywhere, grown trees between the faint ruts, deadfall and windfall, and velvety sassafras fans on both sides. It dips downhill, and I follow it. It dips down, and it disappears, and I follow it. It's basically saying I will sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. I will follow it. And once you make those choices, once you start moving, it's easier to follow the road. You disrupt the status quo a bit, sure. Will Sierra show in a museum somewhere in the world? I don't know. Is Sierra you? Is Sierra me? Sierra is all of us, really, aspiring to do something in the comings and goings of our lives. And I think that is important to remember. And this is important to remember, too. You are a part of all that you have met, yet all experience is an arch where through gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever as you move. And that's Ulysses speaking from Tennyson's Ulysses. And on that note, we've arrived at the end of our time together. Thank you for spending this time with me. I appreciate it. I enjoy doing these solo shows. I hope you enjoy listening as well. If you have some feedback, I would love to hear it. Nave at jamesnave.com. Is this show helpful for you? Did I give you any insight? I would love insight from you as well. Anything else you would like for me to address? Is this worth my time? Is it worth your time? It would certainly be worth my time to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you. Nave at jamesnave.com will solve that problem in a jiffy. What do you do for your work? Is your life and work compatible right now? If not, how could it be more compatible? Do you hold out hope that it will be? I'd love to know. So with that, I'd like to say thank you ever so much for tuning in to Provocative Conversations from Twice 5 Miles Radio. My name is James Navé, and I am your host. I'd like to thank Walter Parks for our theme song, walterparks.com for more on Walter's music. Davine Dial, thank you for managing WPVM-FM in Asheville. And Robin Collier and Mike Tilley, thank you for managing KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio in Taos. I really do appreciate it. Like I said, Nave at jamesnave.com. You can always reach me there. If you like to write, I do host a free writing workshop every Saturday from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We write for 10 minutes. It's a bit of a salon, a bit of conversation. People from all over the world call in. Would love to have you join us if you're in such a mood. You can go to jamesnave.com and find the link for that. It's great fun. Maybe you'll do a little bit of writing. I certainly enjoy it. I have good fun on that call, and I bet you will too if you show up. So I'd appreciate that. And to close, Speaking of earning a living as an artist, here's Sonnet 18 from William Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and oft is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou own'st, nor shall death brag when thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe and eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. What work is? Well, maybe we know now. Either way, again, I appreciate it. I do hope you come back sometime soon. And until then, maybe, just maybe, out there in that wild, wild world we're living in, I'll catch you on that turnaround somewhere down the line.